There's a reason you're still here. You've crossed 60. For some, that number just means retirement or slowing down, but you know better. You know it came with battles. Some visible, some hidden. It came with losses, with scars, with prayers whispered in the dark, and questions that still haven't been answered. You've walked through things that could have easily ended your story, and yet, God didn't let that happen. He kept you, and now the question stands. Why? Why are you still breathing? Still waking up to another morning? Why, after all you've seen, all you've lost, all the nights you didn't think you'd make it through, why are you still here? Could it be that your life still holds more weight than you realize? Could it be that there's something heaven still needs you to do, to say, or to become? Maybe you've never asked that out loud. Maybe you've been too tired or too unsure to wonder. But today, we're going to pause and consider the possibility that your presence on this earth, after all these years, is not random. That you're being preserved for something divine. Before we begin, let me tell you this. What I'm about to share isn't a sermon. I'm not here to preach at you. This is simply a message from my heart to yours, born from Scripture, soaked in years of faith, and shaped by the quiet moments when God reminds us that He's still writing. I'm not claiming to have all the answers, but if you're willing to sit with me for a while, I'd love to explore this with you. And if you feel the Spirit tugging at your heart as we go, that's not me, it's Him. Because the truth is, you're not just existing, you're not just getting by, you're still here because your story isn't over. And maybe, just maybe, the most meaningful chapter is the one you're in right now. Let's find out why. If your heart is still beating, it means God is not done with you. That's not just a comforting phrase, it's a biblical truth. The book of Job, chapter 14, verse 5, says this: "A person's days are determined. You, O Lord, have decreed the number of his months and have set limits he cannot exceed." That means your life isn't sustained by luck or routine or even medicine. It's held together by God's hand, carefully, purposely. You see, the world might look at someone over 60 and quietly assume the best years are behind them. Retirement is expected. Slowing down is accepted. Being less relevant becomes normal. But in God's kingdom, time doesn't erase purpose. If anything, it refines it. And the truth is, if God wanted to call you home, He could have. He's God. He doesn't keep you breathing by accident. He keeps you here because heaven still has something left for you to do, to say, to become. And what if the most important thing you'll ever do in your life hasn't even happened yet? Think about Moses. Most people remember the Red Sea, the tablets, the plagues, but very few talk about his age when it all began. He was 80. Yes, 80 years old. He had already failed in Egypt. He had already lived 4 decades in the desert. He likely assumed his calling had passed. But at 80, God met him in a burning bush and said, "Go. I am sending you." Moses didn't go looking for purpose. It came for him. Because God's plan wasn't finished. Maybe you feel like your best seasons are gone. Maybe you think you missed your window. But let me ask you this. Can a story be finished if the author is still writing? Not a chance. God is still writing your story. And this chapter might be quieter. It might be slower. But that doesn't mean it's smaller. The world equates purpose with productivity, with doing more, going faster. But God defines purpose as obedience. Sometimes what feels small in the world's eyes is massive in heaven's. There are still prayers that only you can pray. Prayers that rise from a lifetime of faith, from nights spent crying out to God when no one else saw. There are still words only you can speak. Words with the weight of wisdom. Words that carry healing because they've been forged in real pain. There are acts of kindness only you can give. Simple gestures that will seem like nothing to you, but will mean everything to someone else. There are people only you can reach. And yes, I mean you. Not a preacher, not a celebrity, not someone younger or more qualified. You. And perhaps the hardest part of all of this is accepting that your purpose in this season may not look like it used to. It might not include big platforms, long to-do lists, or non-stop activity, but it will include depth, stillness, eternal fruit. Psalm 92, verse 14 says, "They will still bear fruit in old age. They will stay fresh and green." God didn't say we might be fruitful if we're lucky. He said we will. That's a promise. That means even as your pace slows, your roots can grow deeper. And from those roots, real fruit can come, lasting fruit that matters in eternity. But here's the tension. Many people confuse a slower life with a fading purpose. That's not how heaven sees you. Your value doesn't diminish with age. In fact, your endurance adds weight to your witness. The years you've spent walking with God have carved out a depth in you that younger generations don't have yet. Your voice might be quieter, but your story? It's thunder to someone who needs hope. And just in case you think your limitations disqualify you, let me say this clearly. Even if your body is weaker, even if you don't move like you used to, or remember things the way you once did, your spirit is still alive. Your prayers can still shake the gates of hell. Your voice can still declare the truth. Your presence still carries the aroma of Christ. The very fact that you're still here is God's gentle whisper. I'm not done with you yet. So don't shrink back. Don't give in to the lie that your time is up. Don't let the enemy convince you that you've outlived your usefulness. You haven't. You're still alive for a holy reason. You may not see it all yet, but purpose isn't always seen right away. Sometimes it's discovered one obedient step at a time. And right now, you're already in it. Because the same God who led you through valleys and victories still walks with you today. He hasn't left your side. He hasn't closed the book. He's just turning the page. You might not see yourself this way, but your life is a sermon, not just a collection of memories or quiet routines or family photo albums. Your very presence is a message to the people around you, a message of endurance, of grace, of what it means to be held by God through every season. Psalm 71, verse 18 says, "Even when I am old and gray, do not forsake me, my God, till I declare your power to the next generation, your mighty acts to all who are to come." That verse isn't just poetic, it's a calling. Because whether you realize it or not, the generation coming after you is watching. And more than hearing what you say, they're looking at how you live. There are wrinkles on your skin and silver in your hair. And while the world may see that as a sign of fading beauty or strength, heaven sees something else. A timeline of God's faithfulness. Every scar you carry, every limp in your step, every quiet sigh in the night, they all whisper, "I've been through fire, but God carried me through." Some people hear Bible verses and wonder if they're true, but you've lived them. You've seen God answer prayers no one thought possible. You've seen doors open that should have stayed shut, and others shut that would have destroyed you had they stayed open. You've seen mercy pick you up after the kind of failure that could have ended your story. But it didn't. Because grace stood in the gap. And now you're here. Still breathing. Still faithful. Still showing up to church even when the pain in your knees says otherwise. Still raising your hands in worship when your heart is heavy. Still forgiving people who hurt you deeply. Still loving when it costs you something. That, dear friend, is not weakness. That's the gospel in motion. Maybe no one's ever said this to you, but I want you to hear it today. Your perseverance preaches louder than any microphone ever could. When you keep believing in God after burying a spouse, that preaches. When you keep loving your children after they've walked away from the faith, that preaches. When you keep praying through loneliness, through illness, through silent years of waiting, that preaches. And yes, the enemy knows it. That's why he tries to silence you. That's why he whispers lies that say, "You're too old, no one's listening, you've outlived your purpose." But if that were true, you wouldn't still be here. The fact that you're still alive is heaven's way of shouting back, "I'm not finished using you yet." Let me tell you something else. There are people in your life right now, neighbors, children, grandchildren, even strangers, who are watching you without saying a word. They're learning what faith looks like in real life. Not in books, not in theory, but in how you carry yourself, in how you choose kindness over bitterness, in how you choose hope over despair. Think about this. What if your greatest impact doesn't come from what you say, but from the quiet way you've chosen to keep walking with God when everything around you said give up? That's exactly what happened in the lives of people like Billy Graham. He preached until his last years? Yes, but it wasn't just the words. It was the way he finished well, the steadiness, the humility, the consistency. Or take Elizabeth Elliot. After losing her husband on the mission field, she didn't step away. She stepped deeper into purpose. She became a voice of healing to generations of broken believers. And she did most of it after the age of 60. You don't have to stand on a stage to change the world. Sometimes all it takes is one quiet life that refuses to stop trusting God, even when things don't make sense. So, what does that look like for you? Maybe it's sharing your story over a cup of coffee with a young woman struggling to believe God sees her. Maybe it's praying over your neighborhood every morning when you open the blinds. Maybe it's simply being present, showing up again and again, even when no one thanks you for it. Those things matter, more than you know. Let your life shine. Tell the stories. Share the miracles. Even the small ones. Remind your own heart, and remind others, that the same God who's carried you for more than 60 years isn't about to let go now. And when people look at you and wonder how you're still standing, still praising, still loving, they'll see more than you. They'll see Jesus. We live in a world overflowing with information. At the tap of a finger, you can find advice on everything: how to raise a child, how to fix a marriage, how to overcome anxiety. There are podcasts, self-help books, endless videos with quick answers. But despite all of that, people are still lost, still anxious, still hungry for something more. You know why? Because information is not the same as wisdom. And that's where you come in. Wisdom isn't trendy. It isn't loud. It's not something you earn from a college degree or a viral platform. Wisdom is forged in time, in fire, in long walks with God through places most people don't want to go. And you, my friend, carry that kind of wisdom. The kind that comes from holding on to your faith through decades of shifting seasons. The kind that isn't shaken by trends because it's been anchored in truth. Proverbs chapter 16, verse 31 says, "Gray hair is a crown of splendor. It is attained in the way of righteousness." That means your age isn't just a number. It's a spiritual mantle. A sign that you've walked long enough with God to know what really matters. You don't need to be flashy to be powerful. You just need to be present and willing to share. There are young people today facing challenges you never could have imagined when you were their age. Identity confusion, cultural chaos, loneliness in a world that's more connected than ever. They're scrolling through thousands of opinions every day, but what they desperately need is someone who's walked with God long enough to say, "I've been there, and this is the way through." That's what Paul did with Timothy. Paul didn't just give commands. He poured out his journey. his failures, his victories, his battle scars. He passed down not just theology, but testimony. And you can do the same. You don't have to know all the answers. You just have to be willing to share what God has taught you, honestly, gently, and when the moment is right. Maybe that looks like inviting a younger couple over for dinner and letting them hear what it took to build a marriage that lasts. Maybe it's sitting with a teenager who's drowning in anxiety and quietly saying, "I know what fear feels like, but I also know what peace in Christ tastes like." Maybe it's sending a note of encouragement to a young mom or sharing with your own children, not just what you believe, but how you got there. Don't underestimate the power of a conversation over coffee. A simple story told at the right time can become a turning point in someone else's life. That's not exaggeration. It's testimony. Your life, your words, your presence could be the very thing that keeps someone from giving up. And let's be honest, the enemy knows how dangerous your wisdom is to his lies. That's why he wants you to feel invisible. That's why he plants thoughts like, "They don't want to hear from me," or "I'm out of touch." But that's not what God says. God is calling you to speak, not to argue, not to lecture, but to pour out what he has poured into you. Because your wisdom isn't just for you, it's a gift meant to be passed on. And here's the beautiful irony. Sometimes when you share what you've learned, you're reminded of it yourself. Your own words, seasoned with truth and gentleness, can water your soul again. Sometimes when you encourage someone younger, God strengthens you too. But let's get practical for a moment. What's one piece of wisdom you've learned that cost you something? Maybe you had to forgive someone you never thought you could. Maybe you had to wait on God longer than you wanted. Maybe you learned to let go of control and trust him with your children, your health, your finances. Whatever it is, that truth is gold. And someone around you desperately needs to hear it. Let me ask you this. If you had 30 minutes to sit with someone from the next generation, just one person, and share something that could help them avoid a pitfall you once fell into, what would you say? Because that conversation? That could be the moment heaven has been preparing you for all along. So don't stay silent. Don't bury your wisdom under modesty or fear. The world is loud with noise, but it's starving for steady voices. Voices like yours. The voice of someone who has walked with Jesus not just on Sundays, but through valleys, through doubts, through decades. Be that voice. You don't have to say much. Just say what's true. Say it in love. Say it with the weight of a life that's been tested and redeemed. And trust that even the quietest seed of wisdom, when planted in faith, can grow into something eternal. Let's be honest. For many people, the hardest part about aging isn't the gray hair or the slower steps. It's the quiet moments. The ones when you look back over your life and remember things you wish you could forget. Decisions you'd make differently if you had the chance. Words you wish you'd never spoken. Seasons you wish you could relive and redeem. And sometimes, if we're not careful, regret becomes a shadow that follows us even into old age. But here's the truth. God did not preserve your life to punish you with memories. He preserved it to display his mercy through you. Lamentations chapter 3 says, "Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed. His mercies never fail. They are new every morning." Every morning. That means even now, after 60, 70, maybe even 80 years, his mercy still meets you when you open your eyes. It still washes over your past. It still whispers, "You are loved. You are forgiven. You are not disqualified." You see, the reason you're still here isn't because you lived perfectly. It's because God is merciful. It's because he's still working. And your life, the one filled with both victories and valleys, is not a contradiction. It's a testimony. Ephesians chapter 2 reminds us of that beautifully. But because of his great love for us, God, who is rich in mercy, made us alive with Christ even when we were dead in our sins. It is by grace you have been saved. That's not just a doctrine, that's your story. Think about it. How many times could things have ended differently? Times when your choices could have ruined your marriage, your family, your future. Times when your weakness overwhelmed you. Moments when you strayed further from God than you ever thought you would. But He didn't give up on you. His love pulled you back. His grace covered you. His hand steadied you when you didn't deserve it. And now, here you are, living, breathing, still chosen. That alone makes you a living, breathing reminder that God doesn't only use perfect people. He uses redeemed people. Sometimes we feel tempted to stay silent because of our past. We think, who would listen to me after what I've done? But that's the very reason someone needs to hear from you. When you say, I've failed, but God forgave me, you shatter the lie that people have to earn God's love. When you show kindness to someone struggling, you reflect the very mercy that restored you. You become a walking invitation to grace. That's why the enemy works so hard to keep older believers silent. He wants shame to win. He wants you to carry guilt instead of testimony. But friend, guilt was nailed to the cross. What remains is your story. Raw, honest, and covered in blood-bought mercy. Think about people like Nicky Cruz, a former gang leader in New York. His life was marked by violence and hatred, until he encountered the relentless love of Jesus through a street preacher named David Wilkerson. Now, decades later, Nicky is a global evangelist, reaching people others would walk past. His past didn't disqualify him. It amplified the mercy of God. Or Joyce Meyer, abused in childhood, broken in identity, burdened with emotional scars. Yet through Christ, she became a voice of healing and hope to millions. Not because she hid her story, but because she surrendered it. God took the ashes and made beauty, and He still does. So I want to ask you, what if the parts of your life you've tried to bury are actually the places God wants to shine His glory through? What if someone out there is drowning in the same shame you once carried, and your story is the rope they've been waiting for? You don't need to dramatize it. You don't need to polish it. Just be real. Say, here's where I failed, and here's how Jesus met me there. That testimony, wrapped in truth and humility, has more power than 1,000 eloquent speeches. God doesn't just use what's been clean, He uses what's been cleansed. And the most powerful testimonies often come from the deepest wounds, once they've been healed. So don't silence your scars. Let them speak. Let them point to the God who didn't give up on you when you had every reason to give up on yourself. Let them remind you and everyone around you that grace isn't just a doctrine, it's a person, and He's still writing your story. You're here not because of perfection, but because of mercy. Let that truth become your anchor, your peace, and your voice. Let me say this as clearly as I can. Someone's eternity may be different because you're still here. Now, I know that might feel like a lot to carry. Maybe you're thinking, me? I'm not a preacher. I don't have a platform. I'm not strong enough to make that kind of difference. But that's not what God is looking for. He's not searching for impressive people. He's using available ones. And if your heart is still beating, it's because there are still people He wants to love through you. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, verse 16, "Let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." That command didn't come with an expiration date. It didn't stop applying once you turned 65 or retired from your job or moved out of a busy season. In fact, the light of someone who's walked faithfully with God for decades shines in a way that nothing else can replicate. Your life, your habits, your kindness, your faithfulness is saying something. You may not always see it, You may not always hear the impact it's making. But in the quiet spaces of life, God is using you to reach hearts that a microphone never could. Think about your ordinary week. The young woman at the grocery store who rings up your items, the neighbor you wave to but haven't spoken with deeply in years, the grandchild struggling with peer pressure, drifting spiritually, the widow who sits alone in the back pew of your church every Sunday. Every single one of those lives could be a divine assignment, not through sermons, but through presence, through a prayer, a listening ear, a word of hope. One of the great lies the enemy whispers to older believers is this: you're not needed anymore. But that is completely false, because in God's economy the greatest currency is compassion. And there's no expiration date on compassion. You still have it, and the world still needs it. Let me share with you two real stories. In South Korea, there was a woman who, after becoming a widow in her 60s, opened her home to international students who had no family in the country. She didn't preach. She just fed them, listened, prayed for them. Over the years, dozens of those students became followers of Christ because they saw the gospel lived out at her kitchen table. In Georgia, an elderly man named Harold, well into his 80s, began writing personalized prayer cards to patients in a local hospital. Strangers. Every week. Just a few words, handwritten, sealed with scripture and love. 5 years later, hospital staff said that his cards had brought comfort to over 4,000 people, many of whom had no family at all. Neither of those people held titles. Neither of them had social media followings. But both of them changed eternity, one soul at a time. And you can too. You don't have to start a ministry. You are the ministry. Your life, your words, your presence, those are tools in God's hands. Every meal delivered, every phone call made, every word of encouragement offered, they're seeds. You may never see the full harvest, but heaven sees. And one day, someone might walk up to you, not here, but in eternity, and say, "I'm here because you didn't give up." So what does this mean practically? Maybe it's time to reach out to that family member you've been distant from. Maybe it's time to start praying for a young person by name each morning. Maybe it's a conversation you've been avoiding, a kindness you've been waiting to offer, or a story you've been scared to share. Don't wait for a sign. This is it. The fact that you're still breathing means God still wants to use you. And if you feel like your body is tired, your mind isn't as quick, your steps are slower, that's okay. God doesn't need speed. He works through surrender. And your steady faith might be the very thing that keeps someone else from walking away. Because you, my friend, carry something sacred. You carry a faith that has lasted, a hope that has endured, a love that didn't run dry. And there is someone, maybe several someones, who need to see that right now. So shine your light in the grocery store, in your family, in your church, in your neighborhood. You don't need to be loud. You just need to be faithful. Because someone's soul is closer to Jesus every time you choose to love like him. After all the doing, all the serving, all the pouring out, what if this chapter of your life is about receiving? What if God has allowed you to reach this season, not because you've finished running, but because he wants you to walk with him more closely than ever before? As we age, life changes. The schedules slow down. The kids grow up. The house gets quieter. Friends move away. Some go home to be with the Lord. The phone doesn't ring like it used to. The spotlight dims. And it's easy, in that quiet, to feel forgotten, like the world has moved on and left you behind. But maybe the quiet isn't a punishment. Maybe it's an invitation. Psalm 73, verse 25 says, "Whom have I in heaven but you? And earth has nothing I desire besides you." That kind of prayer doesn't come from a young heart chasing the world. It comes from someone who's seen enough of life to know that nothing else truly satisfies. And maybe that's you now. You've done the work. You've raised the family. You've built the career. You've served your church. But now God is drawing you to sit with Him, to slow down, not in purpose, but in posture, to make space not just to talk to Him, but to truly know Him. This season of life is not a waiting room for heaven. It's a sacred classroom, a place where intimacy can grow deeper than ever before. Because the distractions have faded, the rush has eased, and your soul is finally ready to listen. Prayer becomes less about lists and more about lingering. Worship becomes less about songs and more about surrender. Scripture becomes less about checking boxes and more about hearing His voice between the lines. And you begin to understand what David meant when he said in Psalm 27, "One thing I ask from the Lord, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life." He wasn't asking for a building. He was longing for communion with the presence of God Himself. And maybe you've longed for that too. Maybe you've sensed it, a gentle pull toward quiet, a holy restlessness when the noise gets too loud. Maybe the things that used to excite you don't anymore. That's not apathy. That might be the Spirit nudging you closer to the heart of God. Let me tell you something that's both simple and profound. God misses you. Not your performance, not your productivity. You, your voice, your nearness, your attention, and He's using this season not to remove you, but to refine you, to strip away the lesser loves, to draw you back to what matters most. There was a man named Brother Lawrence. He was just a cook in a monastery. Not famous, not highly educated. But he discovered something sacred. The presence of God could be felt, known, and enjoyed in the smallest moments, while washing dishes, sweeping floors, breathing simple prayers like, "Lord, I am yours." His writings later became a book called The Practice of the Presence of God, and it has changed lives for generations, not because it was loud, but because it was real. You don't need a monastery. You just need margin, time, space, willingness. You need permission, maybe from yourself, to simply be with God. No more striving, just sitting, just loving, just listening. And let me assure you, this isn't wasted time. It may be the most fruitful time of your life, because when you draw near to Him, everything else falls into place. Your peace increases, your discernment sharpens, your love grows, and suddenly the little things become sacred. A walk in the morning becomes worship. A quiet afternoon becomes an altar. Even your tears become prayers He treasures. So let me ask you gently, when was the last time you just sat with God? Not to ask, not to explain, but just to be with Him. If you haven't in a while, it's okay. He's not angry. He's waiting. Waiting with open arms, with fresh mercy, with a heart that still delights in yours. Because this sacred nearness is not just for the young, the strong, or the visible. It's for you, especially now, especially in this chapter. When the world gets quieter, God speaks louder, if you let Him. So maybe, just maybe, this is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of your deepest intimacy yet. And God is not calling you to do more. He's calling you to come closer. As the years pass, something begins to shift inside of us. The things we once chased don't seem so urgent anymore. The noise of the world feels distant. The applause of others doesn't hold the same weight. And slowly but surely, our eyes begin to turn toward something more lasting, more real, more eternal. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. That's the Spirit of God reminding you that this life is not the destination, it's the preparation. Jesus said in John chapter 14, In my Father's house are many rooms. I go to prepare a place for you, and I will come back and take you to be with me. That's not a vague promise. It's personal. He's not just preparing a place for some future generation. He's preparing a place for you. And every single season you've walked through, every joy, every loss, every long night of waiting has been shaping you for that moment. Think about it. The trials that nearly broke you, they taught you to depend on Him. The tears you've cried, they softened your heart for heaven's joy. The losses you've endured, they loosened your grip on this world. The prayers you've prayed when no one else heard, they've prepared your spirit to recognize His voice when you finally see Him face to face. All of it has been part of the preparation. 2 Corinthians chapter 4 puts it this way: Our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. That glory isn't distant. It's getting closer every day. You're not fading. You're being finished. God isn't erasing you. He's completing you. And maybe that's why even now you feel a different kind of ache, not just physical pain, but a holy longing, a sense that this world, as beautiful as it is, isn't your true home, that you were made for something more. That feeling is not a sign of despair. It's a signal of hope. It's eternity pulling on your heart. You've spent decades learning to trust God in the dark, to follow Him through fog, to obey Him even when it cost you. Eternity is the full reward of that journey. Heaven is not the end. It's the fulfillment. And as you draw nearer, God is doing something quiet but sacred. He's tuning your soul to sing with heaven's key. He's preparing your heart for joy so deep, peace so wide, that when you finally arrive, you'll be ready. But don't mistake preparation for dismissal. God hasn't shelved you while He waits. No, this season is still sacred. These days still matter. In fact, these final chapters of your life may be the most focused, most refined, most fruitful chapters of all. Because you're no longer running after what doesn't matter. You've learned to let go of what's heavy and hold on to what's holy. So what do we do in the meantime? We lean in. We pay attention to what God is doing in our spirit. We say yes to the refining, the slowing down, the softening. We keep our eyes on the horizon, not in fear, but in joyful anticipation. Because when that moment comes, when you step across from this life into the next, it won't be unfamiliar. It'll feel like coming home. And maybe, just maybe, when that day arrives, when your name is spoken in heaven and your story on earth is finished, you'll hear the words that every heart longs to hear. Well done, good and faithful servant. Until then, remember this. Each day you're still here is part of the final touch. Each breath is part of the preparation. Each quiet act of faith is polishing your crown. Heaven isn't far off. It's near. And you are being made ready. If you've made it this far, through loss, through storms, through long nights of not knowing what's next, then please hear this. It's not by accident. You are still here because God's hand has kept you. Not just to survive, but to fulfill something sacred. Your story isn't finished, not because of your strength, but because the author is still writing. There are still prayers heaven is waiting to hear from your lips. Still souls only you can reach with your quiet faith. Still wisdom only you carry. Still someone who needs to know that mercy is real because you've lived it. Still moments to love, to serve, to reflect Jesus in a way no one else can. You're not here just to grow older. You're here to grow deeper, to walk closer, to live with the kind of holy clarity that only comes after walking with God through the long road. 60 years is not the end of your usefulness. It's the beginning of your most meaningful years. These are the years when your faith carries the most weight, your words carry the most wisdom, and your life carries the most credibility. These are the years when your light shines brighter, not because it's loud, but because it's steady. So don't waste them. Don't wait for someone else to go first. Wake up each morning knowing the same God who carried you through every valley, every victory, every season you thought would break you, is still with you. He is still calling your name, still whispering purpose into your spirit, still using your life to echo His goodness across the generations. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to keep saying yes. One step, one prayer, one act of love at a time, until the day you finally cross the finish line and hear Him say, "Well done." And if this message spoke to your heart today, if you felt the Spirit reminding you of your worth, your purpose, and your place in God's story, then I want to invite you to stay connected. Subscribe to this channel so we can keep walking together in truth, in grace, and in purpose. Share this message with someone you love, someone who may need to be reminded that their life still matters. And above all, keep your eyes on eternity, your heart on fire, and your hands open for whatever God has next. You're still here, and that means heaven isn't done with you yet.